Good morning and welcome to the St. Johns County School District's Instructional Materials Adoption Meeting. Today, our adoption committee will determine the resources that will be recommended to the school board for adoption for English Language Arts, grades 9 through 12. Our adoption teams have been led by amazing teams of administrators at their school sites and supported by our incredible district curriculum specialists. Additional support and guidance has been provided by the Instructional Resources and Media Services team of instructional materials, instructional media, and applied technology specialists. Thanks to everyone who made this day possible. I will now turn the meeting over to Kate Houston to share data and information regarding this adoption. Kate?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Hold on, let me move this guy. Okay, so welcome everyone, as Ms. Dixon said, to the formal adoption voting process to choose our next high school curriculum resource for St. Johns County. My name is Kate Houston, and I'm the high school English curriculum specialist for our district. It's my pleasure to share with you information about our adoption process, as well as the outcome of the work that schools undertook over the past few months. As Ms. Dixon said, I'd like to mirror and echo her thanks to all of you POCs, the point of contacts, that the effort and time that you put into this process, as well as being grateful to our teachers and community members who worked to evaluate the resources, and our community member who's with us today. If you're on this call now and you are a point of contact, you did the heaviest lifting in this process, and curriculum and ERMs, we are very grateful for the work that you did. Thank you. All right, our purpose today is to discuss the final results of the school level reviews and rankings, and also to finalize our district committee vote on instructional resources to be submitted to the school board for adoption. We have 3 publishers who we considered over the course of the past several months, and all of these works are on the state adopted list. We have Florida Study Sync grade 9 through 12 published by McGraw-Hill. My Perspectives Florida English Language Arts grades 9-12 published by Savas Learning Company, and Think Circa Core ELAR 912 published by Think Circa. So you are aware, we currently use the 2019 version of Florida Study Sync for our grades 9 through 12, which was adopted during the last cycle and has been in use in our classrooms since 2021. To give an overview of the adoption process for those who aren't familiar with it, first, teachers and community at large were invited to review all 3 resources. Then we had a focus review period where schools formed a formal committee that was comprised of teachers and community members. And during this time, the team or committee conducted a formal review process using a 6-topic rubric that I will share in a little bit. And both the focused review and final evaluation of these resources were due in EdCredible, the online platform that we use for adoption process. They were due in November. So this has been several months of work on the part of our schools and community. Before we go any further, I'd like to start by sharing some strengths and also some areas of need for each of our 3 resources that reviewing teams noted during the focus review process. For areas of strength, reviewers said about Florida Study Sync, this book is familiar and we know the challenges along with this. It also has built-in quizzes, vocab, and writing, and hits all of the ELA areas. An area of strength that a school commented upon from My Perspectives Florida is this resource is of top quality, and committee members were excited by the level of thoughtfulness and planning evident in the materials, which are at a high level of rigor and would help students learn at a higher level. And for Think Circa Core, an area of strength that reviewers noted was that this resource has good vocabulary and writing supports, good year at a glances, and it's tied to the College Board. For emphasis on areas of need, which means committee saw a lack in some domain, we had a comment about Florida Study Sync. We have concerns with overwhelming materials, unclear teacher directions and supports, and weak benchmark level questions and differentiation supports. An area of need that was commented upon for My Perspectives Florida is texts are not as diverse, so the engagement may be low. Literary canon, not necessarily there. It will be new to all high school teachers, and also the team is not a fan of the short stories specifically for 9th and 12th grades. And then an area of need noted by one of the reviewing committees for Think Circa Core was that we think that the curriculum is heavily writing focused as well as strongly focused on informational text. And they felt that that was an area of need for Think Circa. We certainly appreciate all the feedback that was given in terms of the positives and the areas of needs for each resource. So now on to the rubric and the outcome of the rubric evaluations. As I mentioned earlier, the resources were made available for school and community members during the initial review period. And after that, there was a focused review that used a rubric based on the categories you see on the screen. We had 3 overarching topics: content, learning, and presentation, with subcategories or sub-layers under each of those. And these 6 sublayers are the 6 elements of the rubrics that each school team completed and submitted in EdCredible. And again, these were all due in November. Each resource was scored by the school, which also had community members on it, by the school committees using the following criteria and point assignments. So for each rubric category, if they thought a resource exceeded expectations, they gave it 4 points. If they thought it was fully evident, they gave it 3 points. Adequate earned 2 points, limited earned 1 point, and then not applicable was given 0 points. So let's look at how each work came out on the rubric. The first rubric category was content, and looking at it in terms of the ELA best standards. And then remember, this is through the focused review period where the schools and community members really combed through each of the texts. As we go through each element in this section, you'll see that Florida Study Sync is represented in brown. My Perspectives Florida is green, and Think Circa Core is blue. Onto the first rubric category for content, what we were talking about here is that the rubric asked the teams to review the resource under the lens of how well it aligns and covers our Florida ELA best standards, which are the standards we use in our state and county to measure learning and teaching at each level of grades 9 through 12. And based on the points scored for the rubric, you can see that My Perspectives Florida scored the highest in this category, followed by Think Circa, and then by Study Sync. The next category, the second category, again was looking at content, but this time about the texts that the resource uses. It asked teams to answer the question of how well the curriculum provides students with high quality, accurate, and objective texts that vary in subject matter and genre. It asked them to examine if these texts are appropriately rigorous for the grade level and whether they will support students in accessing the full depth of the benchmark each text was chosen to teach. As you can see, My Perspectives again was in the clear first place in this category in terms of points, with Study Sync coming second and Think Circa right behind them, 1 point below them in third. The next category focused on learning. This was learning in terms of teacher instruction. Reviewers were looking to see if the curriculum is written to provide instruction in a way that is teachable, learnable, doable, and accessible in practice. They examined if the instructional practices suggested in the resources are research-based and aligned to effective reading instruction. In this category, My Perspectives Florida was clearly in the first place, with Study Sync coming in second and Think Circa in third. Category 4 continued looking at learning, but this time on how the students learn while using the resource. Reviewers looked at whether the curriculum provides varied opportunities for students to demonstrate their path of learning along the way to mastery of benchmarks through both formative and summative means. And for those of us that have a few years between us and secondary school, you need to know that a formative is what we would traditionally have called a quiz, and a summative is what we would have called a test. So we were really looking at the whole package of how the kids are asked to both acquire knowledge and then show what they know through these resources. And in this category, My Perspectives again was in first place, followed in second place by Florida Study Sync, and third place by Think Circa Core. Category 5 moved on to the overarching element of presentation and looking at how it is presented to teachers. Review teams looked at each resource to see if the curriculum is organized in a way that allows for systematic, which means appropriately paced, and explicit, meaning clear directions and organization for lesson planning, instruction that can be efficient and easy to use for all educators. And in this category, My Perspectives Florida took the lead, with Florida Study Sync coming in second and Think Circa Core coming in third. Our final category, category 6, again looked at presentation, but this time on student-facing side. How does the book look to the kids when they are using it during their classroom learning time? Teams examine whether the resources curriculum is designed to support student learning through a clear structure. Does it have a logical organization? Is the presentation accessible? This is where built-in supports for ESC students and ELL students were evaluated. And then in terms of all students, teams also looked to see if the materials were easy for kids to navigate and understand, with appropriately paced lessons, clear directions, and engaging formats that promote independent and supported learning. In this final category, My Perspectives Florida was again in the first place, followed by Florida Study Sync, and then Think Circa Core. So looking at the rubric, the summary total score of points for this rubric, when you took all 6 categories and added them together, My Perspectives came out as the clearly preferred resource based on the rubric. Finally, during the focus review process in EdCredible, we asked each team to rate each resource as to whether they highly recommend the resource, recommend it, somewhat recommend it, or do not recommend it. Each school had to choose one of these designations for each work. To see which resource was most highly recommended, we'll look here in this very first column. It's clear when looking at this that for the focused review process, My Perspectives Florida came out the clear favorite for our high schools. And lastly, we get to the final rankings. After the focus review period closed, we then asked schools to submit their final ranking of each. They had to take each text and rank it first place, second place, and third place. We have 9 high schools in our district, and all 9 submitted a final ranking to EdCredible. So in the final results, 8 out of 9 schools named My Perspectives as their first choice. Teams commented that they preferred My Perspectives for its ease of use and alignment to research-based reading practices. They said the support materials all make sense with how they are organized and when to utilize them, and it seems the most efficient resource. 7 out of 9 schools named Study Sync as their second choice, and 8 out of 9 schools named Think Circa as their third choice. That wraps up my portion of this call. Thank you for your attention as I covered all of this, and I wonder if any of our participants have questions for me about what you just heard.
Kate, there are no hands raised and no comments in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, y'all.
Thanks so much, Kate. Excellent data, excellent information. Our next step is for voting, but before we move forward with that, I'd like to open the floor for any questions or discussions regarding the materials that any of our points of contact might have with some of their peers here. So any comments on any of the materials or anything you'd like to share that was compelling regarding your the resources or your review time? All righty. So I don't see any raised hands either, Allison, and no comments at this time. So now let's begin to vote. Allison, please launch the voting poll.
We currently have 9 votes in. We're just waiting for one more vote. Thank you. For McGraw-Hill Florida Study Sync, we had 10% of the vote, or 1 out of 10. For Savas Learning, My Perspectives Florida, we had 90% of the vote, or 9 out of 10. And Think Circa Core ELAR, we had 0% or 0 out of 10 votes.
Thank you, Allison. Are there any comments? It seems like the votes are in. All righty, let's take a quick look at what's coming up in our instructional materials adoption process. Based on voting today, our district teams have voted to recommend Savas, My Perspectives, as the first choice for adoption. The second choice is McGraw-Hill's Study Sync. Both choices will be brought forward for school board consideration. The top 2 choices are submitted to ensure that in the event the first choice is not approved or available for purchase, the second choice will replace it as the selection for utilization as our district's adopted resource. While these materials all appear on the Florida Department of Education's adopted list, we know that list is dynamic and we monitor that list to ensure our choices are still there whenever we purchase. Later this week, we will post the final selections that were chosen on our district webpage. Links to this information will also be provided on school web pages and in other materials. This gives everyone a chance to see the final selections that will be submitted to the school board for adoption consideration. Access to the online materials will remain available on EdCredible, and print resources may be viewed at our offices at 3015 Lewis Speedway. A publicly noticed meeting will be held in January where our teams will share the choices with our school board. It's a chance for board members and the community to hear more about the materials and gives our parents and the public the opportunity to share their thoughts with their school board representatives prior to the formal vote by the school board. We expect the school board to vote on the submitted resources during their regularly scheduled meeting in January. Public comment will be available at that meeting also. If the resources are approved by the members, we will post the final list on the district and school websites. If the materials are approved by the school board, there is a required 30-day contestation period that will end on February 13th. If anyone wants to contest the adoption, they'll need to do so before this deadline using the form that will be posted on our website. If a contestation is filed, we'll schedule a hearing to review it shortly before the contestation period ends. Thank you to the Instructional Resources and Media Services team, our amazing curriculum leads and their leaders, our parents and community members for participating in this adoption. We are grateful to each of you for your efforts and participation. This concludes our meeting.